You're listening to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers, with your host, Brenda Swift, as she discusses all aspects of addiction, recovery, and sober living. And now, your host of Just Believe, Brenda Swift.
Hi, welcome to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda, and we are on 900 AM, the Talk of the Palm Beaches, Monday through Saturday at 3 p.m. And we do have a helpline for anyone looking for information on anything they hear on the show or help for a loved one or themselves. The number is 877-309-3635. That's 877-309-3635. And we are here today. I'm very honored to have two guests in the studio that are with a organization that's fighting very hard to make some changes to help save lives. I have Janet and Maureen with Stopp Now organization. Welcome to the show, Janet.
Thank you.
And Maureen.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about all of the things that they're approaching. One of the reasons that I wanted them to be able to carry their message on the show is that our goal is to let people know what's really going on in addiction and recovery. And one of the things that stuck with me, I used to work in the treatment field, and there was a woman that came in trying to get her daughter into treatment, and she wasn't sure, the daughter was saying she didn't really have a problem and all those kinds of things. And she shared with me that her son had died from an overdose. And she said, Brenda, the first indication I had that there was a problem was when I walked in his room and he was dead. Oh. So on that basis, anything and everything we can do to get the information out about what's really going on with the opiates and the things that you're trying to change, that's what we're striving to do. And the organization has stopped now. And Janet, can you give us a little bit of information?
Sure. The name of the organization is Stopp Now, and it's STOPP Now. That stands for Stop the Organized Pill Pushers Now. I was a neonatal nurse, and I kept taking care of more and more and more drug-addicted babies. And at the time, none of us knew why our unit was full of drug-addicted babies. And then about the same time, during that interval, my friend who was doing tough love with her son, and there's many stories like the one you just spoke of that are just heartbreaking. He had an overdose in the hospital. They called her. She went down. He told her all about the pill mills. And you could just walk in and say, my back hurts. And at the time, they were able to dispense themselves, so they didn't even need pharmacies. And they would walk out with 500 pills. The three were oxycodone, Xanax, and Soma. So you've got the opiate, the anti-anxiety, and the muscle relaxer. And 2 weeks later, Blaine walked in front of a car on State Road 7 and was dead.
Oh, my gosh.
And so then, Renee asked me, will you help me write letters and things like that? So that's how we got started. And before you know it, we were standing in front of pill mills with our signs. And mothers saw us on newspapers and came out, and some would stop on a 6-lane highway and just start crying, telling us what had happened to their child. And so we started out that way. We're trying now to get legislation passed. I'm very upset over this 3-year-old little baby that was just murdered in Hollywood. Every adult in that child's life was on drugs, or let me say most for sure, so that there's no lawsuit. But it certainly came across that way. And we are sending these babies, these innocent babies, home to be slaughtered. I've called the Attorney General's office. We're trying to get a meeting now with the Surgeon General. We're trying to do something with the Board of Medicine. All of this is from prescriptions. Doctors are writing these prescriptions for these pills that just proliferate our streets. When we started, there was 150 pain clinics just in Broward County, more than McDonald's, more than Starbucks. And, they're still there. They're under the radar. They're more careful because it was legal what they were doing. And
a lot of people believe that everything that happened with some of this being shut down, that took care of the problem, and that's not the case at all.
It is not. 98% of the top dispensing doctors in the United States were in Florida. when we started our organization.
98%.
98%. Well, dispensing was stopped in October of 2010, which really did help save lives. It honestly did. But those doctors are all still here. And now they just have to write prescriptions and say, here you go fill it. I've got here in front of me 5 or 6 doctors that I just printed up complaints. And the problem is, and Maureen can go into this more for you herself, because she, as a parent, did write down a complaint. But the parents have to file a complaint, like that mother that you said didn't even have a clue until her child was found dead. It's up to them. You know, many of our mothers that are out there protesting with us had gone to the doctor. Please don't give him any more. He's addicted. Child's dead. Doctor's still practicing. They don't know what they have to do. And the mother has to file a complaint with DOH against a doctor.
Right.
But I've got many here, the prescriptions, and I've seen one mother brought me a Macy's shopping bag full of copies of, the receipts from these prescriptions.
Yes.
Every month, you could line them up. 300 oxycodone, 10 Xanax bars, Soma. The next month, 275 oxycodone to one 27-year-old with nothing wrong with him. And the list goes on and on. Still has his license to practice. Cynthia Cadet, I have that here. Many in Palm Beach County are familiar with that name because she was affiliated with the George Brothers Clinic. They got 15 years in prison. The doctors, and when they first started arresting the doctors, it was for money laundering, because initially they would arrest the kid that walked out with 500 pills because he, in order to support himself, had to. And I was saying the real drug dealers inside the building, and nothing was being done. So then they started going after the doctors, and it was money laundering. So those doctors at the George Clinic, they did plead for money laundering. However, 2 of them wanted to go to court, and she was one of them, Cynthia Cadet. So it ended up that they did only the jury only found her guilty of money laundering. But it is very hard to prove that because they charged her with contributing to the death of.
Okay.
And there was 4 specifically. So, but I have her complaint here that from the state, money laundering and all of that, asking for her license to be taken away. Her license is still clear today. She was served. She was given by the judge 6.5 years for the money laundering charge, and so she may be serving now. That's the last I found, that she, in June of last year, she was to start the serving, and her license is delinquent. Like, she didn't send in the money to update it in January. Otherwise, it's free and clear. So I'm going to give it over to Maureen to speak about.
Okay, and for those just joining us, you are listening to Just Believe Radio. We do have a hotline for anyone looking for information about anything they hear here, or if they're looking for help for themselves or a loved one. And that number is 877-309-3635. I have Janet and Maureen with Stop Now organization in the studio, and they're giving us information about the wonderful work and much needed work that they're doing to try to stop all of the dispensing of volumes of opiates and benzos and the things that are setting the ball rolling for a lot of people that do get addicted unknowingly, And Maureen, now what I saw a little bit on the website about how you're involved with Stop Now. Can you give us a little bit of information?
Sure. My son got addicted to physician-prescribed narcotics. And upon realization of that, I was searching and looking for help, and I came across Stop Now, and I quickly joined their group and was out protesting with them. And in the interim, while, just protesting, I know just from my professional background how regulations work and how statute works and who can do what. Our cops can, can't arrest the doctor because it's under professional regulations. Well, I made complaints against 4 doctors. Those 4 doctors, the clinic owner, all of those owners are in jail. Okay. Now, the owner cannot do any business without a physician. The business is physician dependent.
Okay.
So I wrote complaints about 4 physicians, and they were dismissed. The Department of Health found no issues, even though the 291 East Commercial Boulevard, Vincent Colangelo's in jail. Those 2 doctors, Keith Gould, Ismail Landron, the Department of Health found no problem, even though the DEA just busted them. So those doctors are free and clear, practicing what are appointed medical boards obviously must endorse that type of medical practice in the state of Florida. And to me, that's appalling that we have those types of physicians still practicing in our state. And for our state to even think that this problem is gone is just grossly negligent. Our kids are still dying. Physicians are still prescribing. They got smart. They went under the radar.
Of course. And for those that aren't familiar with exactly how it all works, it can be a very innocent thing where you have an injury, you go to a doctor or, of course, the hospital, and you're prescribed the painkillers. And as the prescription goes into, where you're past the point of needing immediate care, you're then referred to a pain clinic. And these doctors are the ones that are continuing to, the ones that we're speaking of here. Some are on the level, there's certainly there is that. But a lot of them are prescribing in volume without any kind of care to what it's doing to the people that get addicted, because there is a physical addiction off the bat, and then you are continuing to crave more and more because of how addiction works in our brain, and you can, it can be a very small thing that turns into the nightmare of your life or ending your life, is what you've experienced quite a bit.
Correct. And we have a huge problem with our post-op patients. We have a huge problem with our kids that are having their wisdom teeth removed. We have mothers in Stopp Now and across the state of Florida. I can name one example. Baseball scholarship, tore his ACL, prescribed Oxycontin post-op. Her son is dead.
Oh.
Okay.
It's heartbreaking.
We have another mother, same thing. It started with wisdom teeth extraction. Dead. Okay, these physicians obviously do not understand the gravity of their prescription writing privilege. Okay, and I think the citizens of Florida need to address that with the medical boards, the authoritative bodies that can change this and turn this Titanic around.
And that's exactly what both of these ladies are working so hard to do. We are going to take a break and come back and hear more stories about how this is working in the lives of people and trying to get the message out that you can make a difference. We will be right back.
Welcome back to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers, with your host, Brenda Swift, as she discusses all aspects of addiction, recovery, and sober living. Now, back to your host, Brenda Swift.
Welcome back to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda, and we have Janet and Maureen in the studio today from the Stopp Now organization. That is, they're both working very hard to make a change to the amounts of opiates that are being prescribed, the Oxycontin, and the deaths that we're hearing in volumes that are a result of these doctors not being regulated correctly. And from what I was reading on the website, you're both nurses, and this is how everything started for you. Now, Janet mentioned about seeing drug-addicted babies, and your experience was different.
My background is the healthcare administrative operations, regulations, accreditations, and on and on.
So the two of you work well together. You see how it's working in the everyday environment in the hospital. And now you talked about the differences that you're able to make. These are through protests. For anybody that doesn't understand what that is, can you give a little bit of information?
Sure. We have signs. Some mothers make their own signs of a picture with their child on it that is now deceased. We have one mother made us up flags that we have that say "Stop Now," and we have banners. That we spoke at a treatment center one time, and this man had his own company, and he said, "I'm going to make you a banner." And so we are a non-for-profit. We pay for everything ourselves. We just started selling T-shirts. We've sold 4 so far. So if you'd like to buy a T-shirt, please go to stopnow.com and put that in for us. We trips to Tallahassee, Washington, D.C., all of these things are a cost, but we can't stop. We can't stop because of all the parents that have told us about their child and what their people write from all over the country. One woman in West Virginia told me that she kept a basement in her house. She kept a few things from her daughter and goes down there once in a while and just smells them. And I'll sit in front of my computer and cry at some of these stories. It's horrible. We've had ER docs stop by and say, "I didn't know anybody was doing anything about this." And he said the hospitals don't want any complaints. They come in and they tell us what to write the prescriptions for. And he said, right down the street, the week before, they got it from another hospital. And I'm like, but that's what the PDMP was supposed to have stopped, Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. He knew nothing about it. I'm on Broward Boulevard and 441 with trucks zooming by explaining to him what the PDMP is because the doctors don't have to use it. And the hospitals are making money too. The pharmacies are making money, and unfortunately even the morgues are making money. It's a lot of money. There's a lot of greed from this. Money is more important than a human life. But we tried this year to get legislation passed. We got the bill written to make it mandatory that prescribers must check the PDMP before they issue a prescription. Unfortunately, it's the Medical Association that is our biggest opposition to this. They don't want anyone telling them what to do or any more restraints put upon them. But I went to an orthopedic surgeon about 6 months ago because I was having knee problems. Believe me, I was not looking for pills to take care of that, but I could hardly walk, and I didn't know if I needed surgery or what might need to be done. And in his own office, I had to sign 2 or 3 different papers relating to this, that they would check to see if I'm on anything, and that even if I need surgery and was on medication while I was in their care, they would continuously check at intervals to see if another doctor is also giving me prescriptions, and they would drop me as a patient. I went in there, I told him what I'm trying to do and congratulated him because through his own effort he's doing this. So once the doctors start to use it, it takes the subjectivity out of it. This person standing before you saying, "I twisted my ankle," you could look in the computer and say, "Look, I see here. No, I'm not giving you anything." But
it takes the stigma out of it, too. Everybody has the stigma of an addict. We can all think for 1 second, what does that look like? Okay, well, today's addict does not look like that. Okay, so for physicians, it makes their job much easier if they just check the database. Okay, and also of the physicians that are using it, and doing the right thing because it makes for good medical decision making, regardless of the patient complaint.
Definitely.
Okay, so we have physicians who are trying to cooperate, and we have physicians who refuse. So what kind of medical decision making is that physician making with incomplete data? Well, you can just fault the Florida Medical Association for continued bad decisions of their licensed physicians.
And that they have that option is just phenomenal to me, that so many things are being put in place to protect people from going through. I had shared at the beginning of the show, for those of you just joining us, that one of the reasons these organizations are so important to get the message out like we are is I had worked in treatment and had been admitting a woman trying to get help for her daughter. And she pulled me aside and said, "Brenda, that I know she may not be ready for this stage, but I want her to be here anyway, because the first indication I had that my son had a problem was when I walked in his room and he was dead." So this is happening everywhere. It's an epidemic, and being able to do anything to start changing the things that these ladies are involved in, it's very important to get involved. They do have a website, Stopp Now, and that's STOPP, stands for
Stop the Organized Pill Pushers Now. .com.
And there's also, I've noticed some links that they can actually write to the legislatures or the individuals that are handling the different bills that you're working on. Is that right?
Correct. There's links there to find who your legislatures are, your representative, your senators. And that's just so very, very important. They need to hear from everybody. If you think, somebody else will call, it's not going to happen until you make the call.
Absolutely, and they're working against such a huge organization. As you said, I'm floored that they don't have, once the things are put in place to change what's happening in the country and beyond, that they're not required to comply with that. That is, I don't believe anybody else knows about that.
It's a proven life-saving tool. There's also initiative from the federal government down to the states to adopt these best practices. And yet Florida, it's an animal on its own. And unfortunately, they should have been the first one to step up to the plate because we started this man-made, physician-controlled epidemic.
Absolutely. And a lot of what we're also seeing is that once they're getting hooked on opiates and they do get past the point of the doctors being able to cover up how much they're prescribing, and they kick them out on the streets with no way of detoxing off of something they're physically reliant on, then most of these kids are turning to heroin.
Correct, because Oxycontin is synthetic heroin. So
this is a great transition into what I was just going to tell you about. This is the most current reporting year, 2013. 4,781 people died in Florida with heroin or prescription drugs and non-medically in their systems. Altogether, there were 1,147 occurrences of heroin or morphine, 4,137 other opiates, which is the narcotic pain relievers, detected in the decedents. So 9 out of 10 heroin users start with the pills. And there are way too many pills out there. And as you pointed out earlier, they don't all start with a joyride. Some of them come about this addiction very innocently.
The biggest growing population is our workman's comp patients.
Oh, of course.
Our veterans and our post-op patients. So it's no longer can you just point to the stigmatized addict. We are actually creating this problem. Florida physicians are creating more problems.
And then these doctors that aren't willing to abide by what might help are the ones that are, basically drug dealers that are legal at this point. And
drug dealers in white coats.
Right,
yes.
right.
And you are listening to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda, and we have a call-in helpline for anyone that does hear anything they want more information on or help for themselves or a loved one. That number is 877-309-3635. And we are talking to Janet and Maureen from Stopp Now organization. For anyone that does want to get involved in your protests, how would they go about that?
Our email address is stoppnow@yahoo.com. And on our webpage, as you mentioned, stoppnow.com, we do have posted what we are working on now. We are going to have a rally against the Board of Medicine meeting at their next meeting because besides legislation, the Board of Medicine, this would be the real game changer. If they took away the licenses of these high prescribing doctors, that would end the problem.
They also have the power and authority to tighten up the controlled substance prescriber registration, to mandate every controlled substance prescriber, which is not every doctor, but a lot of them, to use the PDMP. They can do that through rulemaking.
Okay, wonderful. And we are going to have Janet and Maureen back on another show to talk about all the current things that they're doing and where you can get involved. And you can go to their website as well as Facebook page, and on Just Believe Radio Facebook page we'll also be posting the protests that come along. And we are out of time for today. Thank you, ladies, for coming in and sharing this very important message to everybody that isn't aware of it and that wants to get involved. Thank you both.
Please get involved.
And if addiction is stealing your life away, just believe there is another chance.